I was sitting on a cold, cracked pavement outside a abandoned diner when a man in a long gray coat stopped in front of me and asked, "Are you Sophia?" That one question changed everything. My name, at least the name I was born with, was Sophia, but no one had called me that in years. I looked up at him, my fingers still wrapped around the paper cup I used to collect coins, and for a second I couldn't breathe. His voice sounded like it had come from a different world, a world I no longer belonged to. "Why?" I asked quietly, too used to strangers either ignoring me or throwing pity my way. He smiled a little nervous and said, "Because if you are, I think you just inherited $47 million. Tell me, would you believe him, or would you laugh the way I did that day? To understand how I ended up there, with dirt on my hands and no home to return to, you need to know that I used to have what most people call a normal life. I was married to Daniel for 8 years. We had a small apartment, a beat-up car, and a cat named Oliver. Things weren't perfect, but they were stable. I worked as a junior accountant, he was in construction, and we used to dream about saving enough to buy a little house on the outskirts of town. But somewhere along the way, Daniel changed. Or maybe I did. He started coming home late, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, and whenever I asked, he'd tell me I was overreacting. I ignored the signs for months because I loved him, because I believed marriage meant fighting for each other, not walking away when things got hard. But the night I came home early from work and found him in bed with my best friend, my world collapsed. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, frozen, until he noticed me and scrambled to cover himself. He tried to apologize, said it just happened, as if betrayal were an accident. My best friend couldn't even look me in the eye. I packed my clothes in a single bag and left that night. No plan, no money, just heartbreak. For a few weeks, I stayed in cheap motels, looking for a new job, but with my credit maxed out and my heart broken, I couldn't think straight. Eventually, the money ran out, and I found myself sleeping in my car. When winter came, the car became unbearable, and I ended up on the streets. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I'd get back on my feet, find something, anything. But when you've got no address, no clean clothes, and nowhere to shower, finding work becomes almost impossible. People look at you differently, like you're invisible or contagious. Every day blurred into the next, begging for spare change, searching for warm spots to sleep, and trying to hold on to the tiny pieces of dignity I had left. I stopped recognizing myself. I used to pass the diner where I met that stranger every morning. The owner, an older woman named Marlene, would sometimes give me leftover biscuits or coffee. She never asked questions, just gave me a soft smile that made me feel human for a few seconds. That morning, though, something felt different. The city was buzzing with holiday lights and people rushing around, but I felt like a ghost among them. I was sitting on the curb when the man approached me. He looked out of place, clean suit, shiny shoes, holding a black folder. I assumed he was lost or maybe wanted to toss me a few coins. But instead, he asked that question. "Are you Sophia?" I laughed bitterly. "Used to be," I said. "Now I'm just another face on the street." He opened his folder, took out a photo, and handed it to me. It was a picture of me. Clean, smiling, taken years ago on my wedding day. My breath caught in my throat. "How did you get this?" I demanded. He said his name was Matthew Lewis, a lawyer from New York. He told me he'd been hired by a private estate to locate a woman named Sophia Bennett. My maiden name. Apparently, a woman named Margaret Hill had passed away recently and left me everything she owned. I stared at him confused. "I don't know any Margaret Hill," I said. But Matthew looked at me with such certainty that for a moment, I doubted myself. He explained that Margaret was my biological grandmother. I had been adopted as a baby after my mother, her only daughter, died in a car crash. Margaret had searched for me for years, but the adoption records were sealed. It wasn't until she was diagnosed with cancer that she hired an investigator to find me. She passed away before she could meet me, but she left instructions in her will that her entire fortune, $47 million in real estate, stocks, and savings, be given to me. My knees went weak. I thought it was a cruel joke, maybe a scam. But Matthew showed me the documents, the photos, and even my original birth certificate. The name matched. My name. I didn't know whether to cry or run. Imagine being homeless one day and told you're a multimillionaire the next. I didn't trust him, of course. Who would? I told him I needed proof. Something real. He nodded calmly and said, I expected that. Come with me, and we'll go to the notary's office. My instinct screamed no. Years on the streets had taught me not to trust strangers. But something in his eyes felt genuine. Maybe it was desperation or hope, but I followed him. He took me to a hotel first, insisted I take a shower and change into the clothes he'd bought for me. The moment the hot water hit my skin, I broke down. Months of dirt, fear, and loneliness washed away with my tears. When I looked at myself in the mirror afterward, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Clean hair, a simple dress, no makeup, but I looked alive again. We went to the notary's office, and everything he'd said was true. Documents, signatures, witnesses, it was all real. I was the sole heir to Margaret Hill's estate. I didn't know how to process it. For so long I had nothing. Now I had more money than I could ever spend. The first thing I did was ask about Margaret. Who was she? Why would she leave everything to me? Matthew gave me a letter she'd written before her death. Her handwriting was elegant but shaky. She said she had made mistakes, that giving up her daughter, my mother, was the greatest regret of her life. When she found out she had a granddaughter, she wanted to make things right, even if she never got to meet me. She wrote, I hope you'll use this gift to build the life my daughter never had. I cried for hours reading that letter. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not by someone who pitied me, but by someone who cared, even from beyond the grave. Still, it felt surreal. When Matthew handed me the keys to a penthouse apartment, I almost refused. This can't be real, I kept saying. He smiled softly and said, It's all yours, Sophia. So that's the situation I was in. Homeless one day, wealthy the next. Before I tell you what happened after, tell me honestly. What would you have done in my place? Would you have trusted him? Would you have believed such a miracle was possible? Pause for a second and let me know in the comments what you'd do if a stranger told you just inherited $47 million. After the legal formalities, I moved into the apartment. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble floors, and more rooms than I could count. The first night, I couldn't sleep in the bed. It felt too soft, too foreign. I ended up lying on the floor with a blanket, just staring at the ceiling, wondering if it would all disappear in the morning. It took weeks before I could accept that it was real. I opened a trust fund, started therapy, and began volunteering at the same shelter I'd once stayed in. I knew how easy it was to lose everything, and I didn't want to forget that. But money doesn't fix everything. When word got out about my inheritance, people from my past crawled out of the shadows. Daniel, my ex-husband, suddenly appeared one afternoon, waiting outside the building. He looked shocked to see me. Sophia, he stammered. I heard about what happened. He tried to smile, but I saw the greed in his eyes. I just wanted to say I'm happy for you. I folded my arms. Really? Happy that the woman you cheated on is doing better without you. He sighed, pretended to be regretful. I made a mistake. Maybe we could talk. Catch up. I laughed so hard it hurt. You caught up just fine when you were in someone else's bed. Then I walked away, and for the first time, I felt free. There were others too. Old coworkers, fake friends, even distant relatives who'd never spoken to me before. Everyone wanted a piece of the miracle. I had to learn to say no, to draw boundaries. But not everyone was after money. Marlene, the diner owner who used to feed me, came to see me after she recognized me on the news. I hugged her and cried, telling her how her small kindness had kept me alive some days. I bought her diner for her, renovated it, and told her she'd never have to worry about rent again. She refused at first, but I insisted. You gave me warmth when no one else did, I said. Let me return that kindness. Eventually, I decided to visit Margaret's old house, the place she'd lived and died. It was a huge estate on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by oak trees. Walking through it felt like stepping into someone else's memories. Family portraits lined the walls, and in one of them, I saw my mother, Young, smiling, holding a baby. Me. I fell to my knees and cried again. I felt connected to something bigger than myself, a family I never knew existed. But there was one final surprise waiting for me. In Margaret's study, I found a sealed envelope addressed to my Sophia. Inside was a second letter and a small locket. The letter said she had set up a foundation in my name, meant to help homeless women rebuild their lives. She wrote, "I know you've faced darkness. Use this gift to bring others into the light." I decided to honor her wish. I poured a large portion of the inheritance into that foundation and personally got involved. Every week, I'd visit the shelters, talk to women who were where I once had been, and tell them my story. Not to boast, but to remind them that life can turn around in the most unexpected ways. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if that man hadn't stopped me that morning, if he'd walked past me like everyone else, would my life have ended on that street? Would anyone have remembered the name Sophia Bennett? It's terrifying how close I came to disappearing completely. And all it took was one question. "Are you Sophia?" To bring me back to life. The experience changed me. I no longer measure worth in money or possessions. I measure it in kindness, in the moments when a stranger looks you in the eye instead of looking away. I still visit the diner sometimes, sit at the counter with a cup of coffee, and watch people rush by outside. Sometimes I see someone sitting on the same curb I once occupied, and I always stop, offer a warm meal, and a few kind words. You never know what battle someone's fighting. You never know whose life might change with a simple act of compassion, or a single question. So that's my story. How a homeless woman became the heir to a 47 million fortune. How one question turned my despair into hope. If you were in my shoes, would you have believed it? Would you have trusted that stranger? Or would you have walked away and missed the miracle? I still don't know why fate chose me, but I do know this: miracles don't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes they come when you least expect them, when you've lost everything and have nothing left to lose. If you were on my side through this story, if you believe that kindness and fate can still change lives, then please like this video. It helps more than you know. Subscribe for more real stories like this one, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if someone told you that your name held the key to a new life? I'll be reading every comment, because stories like these remind me of who I was and who I've become. Thanks for listening to mine, and I'll see you all in the next story.